when I was product owner, the first kind of piece that we automated through RPA, and it was very heavily, it was in utilities, so it was all ticket based. I felt like Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone and all the mails coming through the house, virtual tickets everywhere. I think it was like 5,000 a day or something. It was ridiculous. And we automated that process. And then at the end of that, realized that we could have just changed the business tolerances and reduced the tickets anyway. But what it did is it put us on the map. The business straight away saw that benefit, and we were able to then prove, changing the tolerances will get you where you want to be.
Welcome to Agents of IT, where we decode the future of enterprise automation and explore what it really takes to achieve agentic, zero-ticket IT. We chat with a wide variety of guests to discover what's broken in IT operations and spotlight the tech and teams leading the zero-ticket charge. Whether you're a CIO trying to shift from reactive firefighting to strategic value, or an automation architect building the next-gen service desk, this is the space for you.
All right, well, let's get into it. Today, I'm super excited. We're joined by Luke Mitchell, our guest, to dive in and talk zero-ticket IT. So thanks for joining us, Luke. You want to give us a little bit of an intro to yourself and a bit of a history on who you are and what brings you to the Agents of IT podcast?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks for the intro. Good to be here. I'm now a senior manager within the automation space. Been in the industry near enough 10 years, right the way through from kind of side of desk stuff, just a keen interest, all the way through to where I am now. So I've seen a lot of evolution through that period. I've spoke to a lot of businesses in that period. I tend to go to a lot of conferences as well, and I've seen a lot of kind of product offerings both introduced and changed over the years as well. So coming here and having a chat was right up my street.
Yeah, a true expert. I like it. Well, I mean, usually there's no better place to start a story than the beginning. So let's start there, I guess. What sparked your journey into automation? What was the kind of eye-opening experience for you that said, like, this is a path I've got to investigate and go down?
Yeah, to be honest, it was an accident. If I'm being completely honest, I did very, very basic kind of coding when I was at college. Sort of, little small games on Excel through VBA, stuff like that. Found it fun, but never really took it seriously. And then I was working at a bank, and a good friend of mine was the head of process optimization, as it was called back then. And I just kind of got talking to him at a barbecue one day outside of work about what he does and what that means. And he asked me to kind of come and have a look, chat to his team, a little bit of side of desk stuff. And that kind of sparked my interest then. From my work, I was a change manager at the time, and I coded a VBA kind of project framework in Excel. It kind of managed through 250 projects at a time. So it's very, very basic automation. And that kind of got my interest into what is automation. This is stuff happening and I'm not touching the keyboard. This is great. And I then went for a new job. I went for a continuous improvement manager. It's nothing to do with automation. Accidentally mentioned that I was doing a little bit of VBA in my current role during the interview period, and ended up being the product owner of an RPA.
That's always the mistake, Luke. As soon as you admit you're good at something or that you've done something, you become the owner of that thing. So
exactly that. Yeah. And I just started enjoying it really, and you can visibly see difference being made where, maybe historically massive kind of system implementation might take 2 years before you see any difference. Automation, sometimes it's within a week you've got a bit of difference being made to someone in the business, and that kind of just snowballed really to where I am today.
No, that's awesome. I think that's a great humble beginning, and I do love that you touched. So go ahead.
The one thing I've already learned is that how you get a job in automation is at a grill out as opposed to the golf course. I feel like that's an important thing to note.
Meat is everyone's friend.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I also like that you touched on, like it's a topic that we get a lot that gets kind of glossed over, is that like automation's existed for a long time. Like automation has been something that like my grandfather did with punch cards at GE back in the day, right? But it's shifted and it's taken, different tones, and even brought in some of the orchestration stuff, which I know, super foreshadowing we'll get into, because you guys are doing a lot of that stuff in your current role, with orchestrating multiple automations across different systems and different processes. But I think that's a really cool place to start. So, keeping with the path, how has automation changed your day to day? Like, what does automation make your day to day for you and your teams look like?
Busy, definitely busy. But there's kind of two things really. From a personal perspective, I now can't look at any process, whether I'm a customer of a business or whether I'm working. I can't really look at any process without going, that's a really bad experience. It needs some automation in there. Or just, if there is already automation, just appreciating it, because I understand the work that's gone in behind that. But what I've seen in terms of kind of exposure to the internal businesses, when I first started off, automation was seen as a firefight. It was, holy cow, we got this huge problem, someone come and help us. Automation would step in and then look to reactively solve that problem. And now there is a shift, it is very consciously towards, we're going to do something and we know it's going to cost a bit, so we want to save money now, and they're bringing automation products in sooner. There's a great example in the UK. There's a national insurance contribution that the government introduced. It kind of went up by a couple of percent, which to large businesses is hundreds of millions of pounds each year cost. And a lot of businesses saw that as an opportunity to say, right, we're going to offset as much as we can by bringing in automation, investing in that upfront now and trying to prepare. Obviously, not everyone got over the line and got 100%, but it goes a long way.
So that's interesting. Do you think, that's an interesting perspective, that originally you were mostly reactive and focused on, operational work, because obviously that's where the pain of a business is, right? Is that reactive kind of like come and solve this immediate problem, this fire. Do you think that those early successes that you had helping automate some of those processes and fires led to some of your like next projects and next steps, or like what did you buy yourself some extra leg room with the early successes?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when I was product owner, the first kind of piece that we automated through RPA, and it was it was in utilities, so it was all ticket based. I felt like Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, and all the mail was coming through the house, just virtual tickets everywhere. I think it was like 5,000 a day or something. It was ridiculous. And we automated that process, and then at the end of that realized that we could have just changed the business tolerances and reduced the tickets anyway. But what it did is it put us on the map. The business straight away saw that benefit, and we were able to then prove, changing the tolerances will get you where you want to be without investing in the automation. But because we went through that process, everyone kind of their ears perked up. They wanted to talk to us, and all of a sudden the pipeline just grew and grew and grew, and we needed to expand the team to be able to keep up with that. But what it did do is it gave me an appreciation for automation is great, and I am a big fan of it, but it isn't it's not the silver bullet. It's not going to solve everything, and you don't need it all of the time. And so it gave me that appreciation for what is the right solution before we jump in and say let's automate, and that's definitely helped going forward.
So there's two interesting things there, Luke, and you mentioned in your previous response around let's mindset shift that you made, where at some point, I equate it to like you're shopping for a car and you really like this one car, and then you start seeing that car everywhere, and like it's the same kind of thing happens with automation, especially like continuous improvement, process focused, where once you understand the art of the possible of automation, the opportunities are endless. They pop up everywhere, and it feels like you're seeing something that other people can't yet see. And so I'm interested in like, looking back for you, what made you tip into that? Like, what gave you, sight, I guess, is
what was your Matrix moment where you started seeing the
do you
source code
remember,
happening?
Yeah, when you made that shift of like, the light bulb came on and you were able to see?
It was probably during those first few automations, and it was just ticket based stuff, really simple, navigate through a SAP system, clear a ticket off, that type of thing. There was a massive offshore contact center that I think it was about 300 people. It was huge. I think 3 months it took us to automate 5 or 6 processes, and all of a sudden that 300 people was able to go down to 150. And that's not saying they were got rid of. There was 150 people all of a sudden that were re-implemented into other processes, and we fixed a problem here, all of a sudden helped a problem over there because we could assign people to it.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it just, I guess the way I look at things now is, let's get efficient before we go and spend the money. I see a lot of people saying, right, we're snowed under with work, let's go and recruit, let's expand. Hang on a second, can we do things more efficiently before we go and recruit more people? And it just saves money in a multi-layer way.
Yeah, the trickle down effects of like a good automation strategy are incredible, and it's hard to calculate. Like being an automation vendor, like building the business case, you've got the thing right in front of you that you're automating, but you've got all these things that happen around it, that things just start to improve. The other thing that you mentioned that I'd love for you to drill in more is, you mentioned that you had your first automation project. Sounds like it was pretty high profile. Like, you didn't go after like, let's go do this safe thing in the corner. You went after something that actually had the attention of leadership. In my experience, like, if you really want to like instigate change and you really want to create momentum, you go after the thing that has visibility. I wonder your take on that. If like you've seen the same thing in your career where, doing the thing that's in the closet that's safe versus doing the thing that has like real impact, but also like real visibility.
Yeah, exactly that. I think it comes down to, ultimately, unless you are C-suite or CEO and you hold the checkbook, you are trying to prove to someone a reason for spending money, right? And you need to get their attention by doing that. And I think you might have a long-term strategy of, I want to really deep dive into this area and fix this area, but it might be quite a long strung out path, and you're asking for maybe 3 to 5 years worth of money. That's a really hard thing to justify. But if you can do something that's quick, touches a lot of people, and gives you a quick benefit that will justify the ROI, you're looking for 100% minimum. All of a sudden you're getting people's attention because they can spend £10 and get £10 back pretty quickly, right? The way and I'm not trying to create a soundbite here, but the way I explained it before once was, in your house, you might have a garage that's stacked to the roof of junk that you need to sort through, and you just don't have time because you're doing the dishwasher every day after dinner. Well, if we can automate that dishwasher, all of a sudden you've got time to go and sort the garage out. And that's kind of the analogy within the business world as well. If you can get rid of that noise, you can go and do something that's really quite important and quite impactful.
Absolutely.
No, I mean, I think that's a great tie back to the to the comment that you made earlier about like, those early successes bought you the momentum for the future successes. And I think that's absolutely a good call out. Is, that age old adage of like, how do you eat the elephant one bite at a time, is the same kind of thing here. If you can hit those early bites as something meaningful and quick and easy to implement, and then start to grow and build your custom backlog from there, then you get to have some conversations around, is this juice worth the squeeze, right? Is this thing I'm going to go do that's really complicated and differentiated over here, is that going to provide me as much value as the things we did in the past? Is that really the next best thing to do? And I think that's a great call out.
Well, there's something interesting in that too. And like, growing up, my dad loved to have these like one-liners he would throw at me as like, Hoyer philosophy. And one that like stuck with me was, what have you done for me lately? Like, that was his like philosophy in life. He managed a team of people that like dug ditches for a living. And it was always about like, did you show up today? And I think that's true in automation too. Like, we've seen it with many of our customers. You can build a bunch of automation where it's providing a tremendous amount of value. But if at some point you stop building, you stop expanding, you stop implementing, you stop thinking, like you said, you have that sight, but you stop using it, at some point, leadership doesn't understand it anymore. Like they forget about it. And so I'm interested, from you, Luke, like, how do you maintain momentum? Like, you get your early win, but like, how do you show up every day, maintain momentum, keep your leadership, engaged and involved in what you're trying to accomplish?
So I consciously like to do it in a way that, as I mentioned, go after, they always call it the low-hanging fruit, right? Nice and easy, affects a lot of people, gets the attention. And that works for however long you want to go, really. There's, an almost infinite amount of processes that can be automated. If your business has got a large footprint across, stores, or it could be lots of customers in a utility space, there's plenty of opportunities. But then once you've got to a place where your numbers are, they're a headline piece, you can go and update your leadership quarterly on these numbers that look really impressive. It buys you that kind of buy-in to then go, now we want to hit something strategic. Now we know the company's goals are X, Y, and Z. And if you've got, say, your company goal is a 20% reduction in overheads, well, we want to contribute 8% to that, just our department alone. That's quite a powerful message if you're talking about whole of business. And if you can demonstrate your track record of delivery, but then also demonstrate how you're going to get to that 8% over 1 to 5 years with meaningful kind of steps in your roadmap, it goes a long way. Obviously, you do then have the bit where you need to put your money where your mouth is and deliver. But I think the biggest thing is making the execs aware that failure isn't a bad thing. Nobody ever learned anything from success, really. It's gone well, great. When it's gone wrong, okay, well, why did it go wrong? How do we stop that? And how do we move forward from it? My biggest learnings from what I've done is from things going wrong, where, a build might have gone wrong and we've had to sit and debug it, or a system change has occurred and everything's blown up, things like that. That's where you kind of earn your stripes and you realize, right, this bit went wrong, therefore whenever we get the next build, we're going to do it a little bit more efficiently. And all of a sudden you start building faster and you start delivering faster, and then you can start making more promises and deliver on them quicker, and that buys you even more momentum. And I think once you've tied in with the company's goals, if you can gain that momentum, you can get as far as it never stopping. It's all about keeping the visibility without boring people with too much detail.
Well, there's something interesting in that too, Luke, that like what it sounds like the way that you were able to continue and also get buy-in is aligning to these strategic objectives of your leadership team. Right. And I think that like what you mentioned of like being able to align to essentially an OKR around like cost management or efficiency or effectiveness of a team or department. That doesn't, it's not a automation initiative, but automation can impact the initiative. And I think that's a really interesting aspect of automation too, where it as a C-level executive, I don't define initiatives like let's go automate 90% of processes. I define initiatives as like we need to get more efficient in this domain so that we can take on the next challenge that is this. Like it's these circles that kind of build. And so how do you in your career, how have you identified and kind of tied yourself to those key initiatives? Are there, certain kinds of initiatives that you think are more well suited for automation versus others? Like where have you found success there?
I think it's about being fluid. So the natural go-to when you're automating something is hours saved, money saved, or FTE saved, because it's an easy track, right? If you've got a 40-hour week and your automation is running 80 hours, that's 2 people. Nice and easy. It's really simple maths. But I think when you get into more strategic areas, and like you say, you're not looking for, I want a 2 FTE saving in that department. You're looking for, I want an efficiency saving.
Yeah.
You then start running into kind of downstream, primary, secondary, tertiary benefits. So yes, your primary benefit of automating journey X might be 10 FTE as an example, but actually the strategic and the corporate goal there is, if we take the incident management route, let's say, we want to reduce our mean time to detect by Y. And that is then a secondary benefit for automation, but actually it's the core strategic one. So you're getting a 2-layer benefit on that. And I think never losing that foresight of what's your end goal in terms of the corporate, overall objective.
Yeah.
How do we get there with little bite-sized objectives? And it might be that you prioritize automating a process that's really small, say 1 FTE's worth, and you maybe postpone something that's worth 15 FTE, but there's a holistic end goal for that and the reason behind that.
So you've said FTE many times now. So let's address that can of worms. Is like
I was about to jump in there because you did a good job talking about it earlier, about the fact that like it's not about necessarily about eliminating, it's about reprioritizing and repurposing resources for the most valuable thing in the business.
oh, now you're
No, he said listen, he said he hit that topic when he talked about the SAP 300 employee thing, but I was like, in the back of my mind I was getting a little nervous. I'm like, all right, we just keep talking about the FTE spend, but eventually that pool changes. So
I'm interested in there's two sides to that I've seen. Is like, you're a frontline employee, and in many cases you're concerned, right, that automation is going to take your job, right? But then from it's some layer in the hierarchy, that conversation switches from like, we're worried about people losing their jobs, to a grander scheme, right? And that's kind of what you're speaking towards, is like this vision that a leader has to have, where it's like, if we create space for 150 people already employed by us to have new jobs, what are those jobs going to be? What does it look like? What do we assign them to? So I'm interested in that, Luke. Is like, there are definitely leaders out there, and like, we've seen it countless times in the last 2 years, 3 years, layoffs. Like, everybody is doing layoffs. AI has created layoffs. Automation's created layoffs, whatever it is. And so like, there is a world too where FTE reduction is a strategic business imperative as well. So I don't know, from your perspective, again, like, I'm interested in like, is there like a type of leader where you are positioning true FTE reduction, layoffs, versus FTE reallocation and re-education, where they're being reallocated to something? Like, have you seen a balance, or is it skewed one way versus the other?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it. It depends on the state of the business, right? Sometimes I've seen it where the business had just made a few wrong decisions before automation even got in there. And it was like almost coincidental timing.
Yeah.
Automation's coming in to help things out, but there's already been a decision made. What I like to do, when it's a case of we are looking at reallocating, hence why I was just like, slip of the tongue, going for it. I try and normalize talking about FTE, because the way I look at it is, if we're saving money, we can use that money to retrain people, and that's career development, right? That's what people want. When it becomes for whatever reason we need to lay some people off, obviously it's never a nice conversation, and it's never a conversation that I want to be leading. I'm an automation leader. I work in technology. I'm not HR or anything like that. So I guess it's a little bit of a slopey shoulder moment. I try and get the HR guys or whoever needs to be involved in that to kind of lay that groundwork, because it's a sensitive time. And what you'll also find is, an automation team, if someone's got the message of, really sorry, you're going to be out of the business, then try and talk to that person and ask them how they do their job so we can automate it. It's an impossible conversation.
That's a recipe for a lot of dragged feet.
I've always been of a mindset of work myself out of a job. That's how you get promoted, but I'm like more of an ambitious type, and an achiever. And not everybody is like that. Most people, they like to work a job that they feel comfortable and confident in. And so I do think like the training element to this, if you're going to ask them to do something different, is important and impactful. And the way you articulated there is through transparency. Is let's have an honest conversation with these folks. The business isn't doing that well. We're going to have to make these changes. And like, we have a value resolve that's mutual benefit. And so, if you have a good, transparent conversation with those employees of let's figure out mutual benefit here. We'll give you a severance package that looks like X if you help us to achieve Y. And in that case, you're not, kind of duping them of like, help us with this automation project. We promise everything will be fine. And then once it's done, they don't have a job. You know, I definitely think like what you highlighted there around transparency is super important. The other thing you highlighted of like the automation project didn't create the need to make layoffs. The need to make layoffs was already there because of other external factors or decisions made in the business. Automation kind of becomes the scapegoat of it, which is unfortunate, you know, given the power of our solution.
And
Well,
I think oh, sorry, Eric.
Oh, sorry. No. Please go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's easy, especially, you know, if a well-known company is making layoffs, it usually makes, well, certainly in the UK, it makes the media, right?
Yeah.
And it's easy because, you know, that's a negative connotation. They're looking for clicks or paper sales, whatever they're looking for. But my job 15 years ago didn't exist. So whilst, yes, there may be some jobs that go, there's new jobs being created. You know, 60, 70 years ago, mining was a pretty common job. It's not that common anymore. That's on its way out. My job didn't exist 15 years ago. So yes, AI can come in and do some cool stuff and it can help you out. But then who's going to be coding the AI, controlling the AI, making sure that there's a governance framework around that, making sure that there's kind of a pathway for development in that field. So many more jobs are being created. So I think it's easy for a news outlet to say, you know, so-and-so cut 500 jobs, fine. But actually, how many jobs are they bringing in because technology is changing?
Yeah.
And that never gets reported.
Yeah.
So that kind of hits one of the questions I wanted to cover for sure, is like, you all through this entire conversation, you've talked about like the gentle shifts of your team, of your mindsets. Like, help walk us through, you know, when you did start down this journey, when you did hit a couple of those big automation successes, like what did the role of the IT team that you were working with look like, and how did that change? Because like, it sounds like they started to become almost a little bit of like process analyzers on top of IT people, because they had to think about how to, you know, where it made sense to put in automations and where it made sense to look for efficiencies. So yeah, I mean, talk us a little bit through that.
Yeah, you're spot on, really. It started off as, you know, if there was a problem, give IT a call, give them a shout down the phone, like let them know there's a problem. And then when they build something and it goes wrong, make sure you let them know again. And it was very much like that. Difficult to get a lot of information because people have got busy day jobs and they're not really, IT isn't a priority, customer service is a priority, therefore I'm not giving you any of my time. And that it's almost done a 180 now. And certainly in my role, it's more of a side-by-side working together, where, you know, we'll sit and we'll look at that process. Someone will run us through, we'll ask questions, we've got time to go through kind of exception paths, dropouts, all of that kind of stuff. And it's more of a, rather than you need to automate this because there's a problem, it is, I've got a problem and I don't know what to do. Can I take you through it and then give me some advice? And I've been through that conversation plenty of times over the last few years where someone's come to me with a problem. I've kind of sat and understood the problem, realized that it's not for automation, it's for something else. And I'm able to then say, I think your solution is here. Maybe you should speak to this person. This is why I believe that. And then it's a warm handover. And all of a sudden, that business person hasn't had to shout at 3 different people and repeat themselves. They're just able to get their kind of solution done. And that's always where I've tried to go, in that I don't want to take over anything. I just need information to be able to fix your problems, help me to help you. And that's kind of how I always try to approach it.
I mean, I love that approach. I think one of the things you highlighted there is like one of my favorite parts about this. And it sounds like you've definitely reaped the benefit of, you know, as you go in and help with these efficiencies and help solve some of these problems, especially where you're getting secondary and tertiary benefit, right? Like less phone calls, less tickets, less distractions, less things, that the business now sees you as a partner instead of those nerds in the basement that like they called up when they had a problem, right? And I say that being a nerd in the basement, I used to be in the basement all the time. But like, it sounds like you've benefited from this concept of like, now you're seen as a trusted business partner. You're being brought to the table to solve these problems. And I think one, that's just nice as a career advancement, right? To be at the table talking about these problems. But two, I think the thing that gets missed a lot is that oftentimes because you're involved in that process, it means that your deflecting things that would have come to IT as part of that new implementation or new process or new thing, because you're being involved from the beginning. So it's not just like, okay, we've done this thing and now IT's got to help me support it. You're part of the process and you're building those automations or those steps or those processes in advance. So, I mean, I guess that's not really a question. That was more of a statement, but like, you know, do you feel like you saw, do you feel like you saw that kind of elevation of like business partner as you kind of continue down your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. And it really is a two-way street. You know, you're helping the business get on with their job, do their jobs in a more efficient way. But I've learned things about businesses that I would have never learned otherwise. For example, when I was in the utilities world, you know, I could never have told you how sewage water gets treated and all that kind of stuff. But being in that environment, working with that business, going through those journeys and looking at automation possibilities, all of a sudden I did learn that. And then what that it gave me was I was able to go, well, actually, you're talking about kind of this section of a process, but actually we could automate the whole journey here by doing X, Y, and Z, bringing in potential new technologies, because I had an understanding of what that journey was trying to do, the outcome of that journey, and what that meant for the customers. So it definitely is a two-way street. I've learned so much, you know, working with the business closely, and hopefully they are picking up technology, they're learning about automation, the possibilities of it, and it just makes that kind of adoption rate shoot up just organically, which is really nice.
There's something we've talked about a few times in the past in our conversations, Luke, and it's something Ari and I talk about a lot, which is helping people understand the art of the possible with automation, right? And like it unlocks. So we've already talked about it a little bit with, like, you know, we called it sight, or I called it sight, of like being able to see the opportunities. But like, do you, through these conversations with these business focused people, do you see a point where they start to understand, and like, how do you approach those conversations to try to instigate that shift in mindset with them?
Yeah, there's a few layers. So I've been involved in conversations where, you know, you're looking at bringing a new technology into the business, and someone who is an expert in their field will say, no, that's not going to work there. And that's always hard to hear, because most of these companies are multi-million-dollar companies, and they are in God knows how many businesses, which kind of tells me straight away it works. If we don't think it's going to work in this business is the problem. So there is that kind of that conversation initially, but then it is, once you're in, and like you say, the art of the possible. I just want to automate this Excel data being input into the system. You know, great, not a problem. We can do that. That's fine. But actually, I go back to that kind of two-way conversation where I say, well, I want to learn a little bit about this process, because if something goes wrong, we need to know how to handle it. You know, we need to know the fallout. So I like to go into that conversation of open-minded. Let's just map out the process, map out the journey, map out all your fallouts. Who have you got working on this? Why are they working on this? You know, what are their expertise? And if that hopefully gives me a few bits to go, actually, what about this? What about that? If I've already got live examples, I'll run a demo, nice and easy. But most of the time, if I don't, I can just come to guys like yourselves and say, you know, I've noticed this in my business. I think we've got an opportunity here. Could you, you know, have you got any examples of this that you've done something? Could you come in and run a little bit of a conversation for us, just to help me get it over the line? Because I even though I might have experience, I'm still that one guy working for a massive behemoth business, right? The experts are the people that are going to kind of work the influence side of things. So I always like to try and work in partnership.
Yeah, there's something super interesting. Like, you and I have talked about this, Luke, of like, my career has been on both sides. Like, I have been the consultant expert, subject matter expert, but I've also been in your shoes, Luke, where I'm trying to drive change within a company. I am within it, trying to like influence and get them to move the needle. And there's some really interesting psychological thing that happens where your executive team is much more open and willing to hear the message from an external party than they are from an internal party.
The consultant clout, man. Come on. The consultant clout is real.
Yeah, I have come in and said the exact same thing as at one of our partners or customers, and it resonates. And the other way around too. I've brought friends in to talk to my leadership team, and I gave them a script, and I was like, "Look, here's what I need you to like say to these folks to get them on board." But I mean, if you're someone out there looking to drive this type of change, it sounds like what you're saying, Luke, like reframing it a little bit is like, don't let your ego get in the way. Like, find partners to help you on the journey. It doesn't diminish what you're able to accomplish. It actually increases and elevates it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about that vulnerability, right? You might be looked at internally as the expert on automation if that's your position, and you might well be the expert in your organization. That doesn't mean you're the expert in the globe, on the globe rather. And so it's about that vulnerability, being able to say to someone, look, I think this is right. Maybe can you sense check it? But actually, can you come in, have this conversation, and really start to drive home the message? And it's never, the first time you do it, it's never nice. Nobody likes kind of facing into a vulnerability, but it works. Yeah. And I've done it plenty of times, plenty of different kind of consultants, vendors, you name it. They've come in, they've had a conversation, it's worked, we've moved on, and we're able to get somewhere with it.
Yeah.
Well, I've always looked at it and talked about it. Like, I spent a decent, just like Sean, I mean, you as well. I've spent plenty of time in the consulting world doing this. And, I always explained it to the people that I worked with of like, listen, this is the same as getting a second opinion from a doctor. It doesn't mean that the first opinion wasn't the right one. It just means like the more you hear and the more you see the process. And that's why, like, I love your kind of, I hate the tired analogy of like peeling back the layers of the onion. But like, Luke, that was exactly, as you were saying it, like, it's great that you want to automate this thing, but like, let's talk about this thing. Let's talk about the whole process, the other dropout points. When you start having that more like that larger conversation, yes, it's harder because you're asking somebody to like show them all of your weak spots and all your vulnerable spots. But once you start talking about that end-to-end process and having like really good conversations with the team and with the, the leadership team that owns this part and this part and this part, once you start having the bigger conversations, then you really do open up the possibility to make like business changing improvements, and that will only help further your story and your successes. So
yeah, absolutely.
Great question, Ari.
Yeah. Oh, listen, I was just tying it all back together. So I mean,
I got one more. Come on, I'm already talking. I've got two more, but I'll ask one, and then I'll let Ari talk because I just cut him off. The one thing that I'm interested in, and you have experience in continuous improvement and change management and organizations, and that's hard, right? People are probably the hardest part of business in my personal experience. And I'm really interested from you. You definitely, it sounds like you have some tactics that you've used that have worked, but I'm interested in specifically, are there specific hurdles that you've run into, like specific blockers or friction points within organizations to adopting automation that you've run into? And then if you have, really interested in kind of your insights and how you made it through those or over those.
Yeah, one that really jumps out straight away, it isn't necessarily automation specific, more kind of the way of working, I guess, that automation kind of presents to you. In a previous business, the change management process, and I kid you not, it was like 90 days for one implementation, which might make sense on a 2-year SAP migration. When I'm trying to deliver RPA every 2 weeks, it's a really difficult thing to get through. And it wasn't automation that was the problem. It was the fact that we were no code and worked in a DevOps fashion, and we were able to just iteratively build and deliver. That was a real issue, and it was an issue for 18 months. In those 18 months, it was chaos. In those 18 months, we actually developed a way of kind of getting through that change management process by bringing them on board. So we got assigned our own kind of change consultant within that world that we brought through, brought them to our ceremonies, all of our kind of stand-ups. They could see what we were working on a day-to-day basis. They saw warts and all, everything that went wrong. They were abreast of it all. We kept screenshots, logs, you name it. Very, very, very painful at first, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
But we got to a point where he almost became an automation expert, and it was great because he then started to proactively go through the change management process without us because he could see what was up and coming. Sure, bigger deliveries, yeah, a lot more questions as you'd expect, but the kind of nice, simple ones, he was on board with. It was great. And at the end of it, we come out and they called it a gateless process where 90 days turned into 3 days. It was phenomenal.
Wow, that's
And
amazing.
it was really,
that's a heck
good.
of an improvement right there.
I mean, that's people change though too. Like something that you
Yeah.
mentioned there, Luke, and it seems to be a theme with your success is transparency. It is like you seem to create very transparent environments, and I think, and it sounds like, again, this is me like reading back to you, sounds like it's helped you build trust and helped you overcome some of these hurdles.
Yeah, it's how I like to work. If I'm working for you and you're my boss and I'm not doing a great job, I'm not interested in the whole 360 sandwich. Just give it to me straight, because if I know what I'm doing wrong, I know how then I can improve it. And
Yeah.
whilst not everyone likes that kind of direct, harsh conversation, I feel that just being open and as understanding as I can be puts you on the same page, and then you can start to build that trust, build that conversation up, and get somewhere.
Yeah.
So
all right, Ari, it's your turn.
I would be remiss if I didn't bring up this conversation, right? I mean, AI is in the news. Everyone's, like automation and AI are synonymously linked at this point. Like, a lot of people refer to automation as AI in a lot of cases. So I guess, I have a question for you, maybe a two-part question. I guess first is like, how do you deal with the fear of AI that when people come and talk to you about, what AI and automation are doing? And then secondly, like, a lot of people are doing AI just to do AI at this point. What do you see as some of the more valuable successes that have come out of AI and AI plus automation?
Yeah, I'll start with I think it's a repeat of automation, right? When automation first came in, it as we've already mentioned, RPA is going to steal my jobs. This is going to steal my job, and we're seeing that again. It's like a third wave with AI. But as we've kind of already discussed, there'll be new jobs that AI will bring. Sure, it might take some, simpler jobs, but then those people doing those jobs can be retrained. They can then start looking at, new jobs or be repurposed within the same business for different types of jobs. So I think, the way I'd play it is very similar to automation. And as you've already kind of seen, I like to be as transparent as possible. That's how I would play that. And in terms of what AI can be used for, it was great. ChatGPT allowed you to turn yourself into an action figure. Phenomenal. But realistically,
do you have a lot of processes at your current business that ask you to turn people into action figures?
I've become a meme in our Slack now, so that's great.
Yeah.
There you go. See, so they're the most important uses. No, I think the two places I see that are going to be benefiting over the next, say, 5 years from AI, there's the ITSM world, and then I think there's SecOps. I think ITSM at the moment, you've got really big players, your ServiceNows, your Zendesks, all that kind of stuff. And don't get me wrong, great tools, but they are huge tools, and a lot of businesses rely fully on them. Tickets are coming out of people's ears. That's how many are being raised. Some of them are noise. Some of them, you could change your business tolerances. Actually, when you get down to the crux, I haven't done analysis, so I'm not going to say it's a fact, but I'm willing to put a bit of money on that there's going to be a small percentage of those tickets that are actually needed. And I think when you start to layer in things like agentic and in the near future, the multi-agent level agentic stuff, I think you get to a point where you're going to start reducing your tickets quite significantly. And I think that then opens the door to smaller bespoke ITSM offerings that are layered in with agentic that just make it all round better, from detecting your incidents, resolving your incidents, people staying abreast of any issues that you may have. But then also, in terms of the operation teams, having a delve through tickets, well, you can have an agent now acting as a co-pilot, telling you what you need to look at, what you need to resolve, potentially how you need to resolve it. Or you could go all the way and just say, look, this is how we're going to resolve it. Click yes for me to do it. So I think that's going to be a heavy place. The second place, I think, is SecOps, because as you've probably seen, as everyone's seeing at the moment, hacking is huge. Businesses being hacked left, right, and center. Most businesses have their own kind of internal pen testers and other things that are helping with that. But actually, what if you can just put AI in to detect anomalies across your network or your infrastructure, start to look at ways of, actually fighting that live in real time rather than just a report say there's a hack attempt here. So I think that is going to be a really important place as well. I think they're the two big places.
Well, especially as people are using AI to generate those hacks. Right? I mean, that's the hardest part. Is it's like, oh, this AI is great, it's helping me, but also it's helping the enemy. So it's tough.
Well, I think that's a great place, a great segue into the closing. Thank you, Luke, so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom and your insights with us today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a really good conversation.
All right. Well, that concludes our episode of Agents of IT. Ari, any last words, buddy?
No. Thanks for joining us, and look forward to the next time. And thanks again, Luke.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Agents of IT. If today's conversation got you thinking differently about your own IT operations, or if you're curious about how agentic automation is helping teams make the zero-ticket vision a reality, please don't forget to like and subscribe. You won't want to miss what's next. See you next time.